The Langford estate had not heard laughter in 11 months. Until tonight. Philip Langford stepped through the grand entryway and froze. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not tonight. Not yet. He'd come back on a whim. No driver. No staff announcement. Just a sudden pull, like something unfinished had called him home. But what he heard, music drifting down the hallway, soft singing, giggles that made the walls vibrate, was impossible. This house had forgotten joy, forgotten sound, forgotten life. Sophie and Stella hadn't laughed once since the accident, since the day Evelyn was taken. His heart thudded painfully, and for a moment, he thought he might be hearing things. He moved slowly, as if any sudden step might shatter the illusion. And then a burst of pure, uninhibited laughter rang out. High, sweet, familiar. He didn't breathe. He turned the corner, and what he saw. But wait, let me tell you how he got here. Philip Langford wasn't just powerful. He owned power. A man made in the fire of business wars and cold negotiations. He had conquered markets, dismantled empires, and built one of his own. But all the power in the world couldn't stop a phone call at 2:37 a.m. It took exactly 17 seconds to erase the future. Evelyn Langford, his wife of 9 years, mother to their twin girls, was gone. A sudden accident. A random, merciless fracture in the timeline of his life. She had kissed their daughters goodnight. She was supposed to be home in 20 minutes. She never made it. The aftermath wasn't loud. It was silent. Too silent. The mansion became a mausoleum. Sophie and Stella, once full of songs and games and bedtime questions, became ghost children. They stopped speaking, stopped laughing, stopped playing. The staff walked softly. The clocks ticked like drumbeats in a funeral march. Philip, for all his resources, couldn't fix what had shattered. He flew in the best grief specialists, the most renowned child psychologists, therapists with reputations worth more than small countries. They all left the same way, kindly, apologetic, and defeated. He tried structured play therapy, equine therapy, even built a sensory room in the East Wing. Nothing. The girls didn't cry. They didn't scream. They simply disappeared inside themselves. And then, when Philip finally gave up trying to force a solution, Marissa Cole arrived. Not with a resume of accolades. Not with Ivy League credentials. She came with worn shoes, a quiet voice, and eyes that looked like they'd seen pain and made peace with it. She had only come to clean. But 5 minutes after meeting her, Philip saw something shift. A flicker of recognition in Stella's eyes. A breath, not quite a smile, but close, from Sophie. It couldn't be real. Could it? Still, he gave her the job. Not as a therapist. Just a maid. A presence. He didn't expect miracles. He didn't expect change. But something was happening. And on the night he returned home unannounced, Philip was about to witness the impossible. A spark in the silence. A voice returning to the void. A soul returning to life. And Philip had no idea that this woman, the one he almost dismissed, was about to bring his family back from the dead. Before we dive into this emotional story of healing, loss, and the miracle that happened inside the Langford mansion, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Now, let's continue the story. Marissa Cole showed up with 2 worn suitcases, a soft smile, and no expectations. The Langford mansion loomed in front of her like a museum that had forgotten it was once a home, grand but hollow, the kind of place where every footstep echoed with memories. She stepped inside quietly, almost reverently. The air smelled like old wood polish and lavender that had long faded. Framed photos lined the hallway, Philip with Evelyn, then the girls as infants, their giggles frozen in time. Now silence ruled this house. The twins, Sophie and Stella, sat at the kitchen island when she arrived. Or rather, perched still guarded, eyes blank as winter sky. No greetings, no questions, just the quiet hum of sadness too deep for words. Marissa didn't try to change it. She unpacked her ingredients and began cooking a simple breakfast, nothing fancy. Just warm pancakes, scrambled eggs, and fresh strawberries. She moved slowly, letting her presence speak louder than her words. She hummed a hymn under her breath. It is well with my soul. Soft, gentle, healing. Sophie peeked around the corner once. Stella hovered near the counter, pretending to look for something. Marissa didn't acknowledge it. She just set 2 plates on the table and whispered, "In case someone's hungry." Then she stepped away. No coaxing, no bribes, no therapist jargon. Just an open seat at the table and food warm enough to say you're safe here. Philip watched from the study, arms crossed, a puzzled frown on his face. This woman was doing nothing. No charts, no plans, no reports, just being. She's not a doctor, he muttered to himself. What is this supposed to be? Yet something was different. Later that afternoon, Marissa found a tiny crayon drawing tucked beneath the fruit bowl. 2 stick girls and a sun. No name, no comment, just there, waiting. She didn't say a word about it, just smiled and slipped it into her apron pocket. As the sun dipped low, she knelt to tidy the playroom. Dust still clung to the shelves, toys untouched for months. A tea set sat in the corner, 2 cups missing. She found them later, neatly placed beside the twins' bedroom door. By bedtime, she quietly whispered a prayer over the hallway. Lord, you are near to the brokenhearted. Let these little ones feel that nearness, even if they can't say it yet. Psalm 34, verse 18. She turned to leave when she heard it, barely audible. A whisper, soft as breath. Pancakes. She froze. Marissa turned just enough to see Stella at the top of the stairs, her eyes wide, lips barely parted. It wasn't a sentence, not even a question, but it was something, a beginning, and for the first time in nearly a year, a sound so small, so sacred, it brought tears to Marissa's eyes. Philip, watching from the shadows, gripped the banister. He had no words. Neither did Marissa, because sometimes healing doesn't shout, it whispers, and in that quiet moment the house breathed again. A flash of light reflected off a hidden frame in the hallway, one Marissa hadn't seen before. She stepped closer, and what she saw made her heart stop. Marissa didn't come with a strategy. She came with rhythm. Morning sunlight spilled across the kitchen floor as she moved quietly, humming while she stirred pancake batter and brewed chamomile tea. The same hymn again. Great is thy faithfulness. She didn't sing it loud. She didn't need to. The tune hung in the air like something sacred, like a memory being stitched back together. Sophie lingered in the hallway today, closer than yesterday. Her little fingers twisted into the hem of her sweater as she stared. Marissa, sitting on a stool, slowly braided her hair. Over, under, over, gentle and steady. Her hair was darker than Evelyn's, but the movement was familiar, almost maternal. A flicker of memory sparked in Sophie's eyes. The girl didn't say anything, but her hands rose, mimicking the braiding motion on her own hair. Clumsy, hesitant, but trying. Later, Marissa placed bowls of soup and tiny grilled cheese triangles on the table, without a word. Then she sat near the window with a book and pretended not to watch. Sophie picked up a fork. Then Stella leaned in close and whispered something, too soft to hear, but her lips moved. A full sentence, or maybe just a question. Either way, it was a miracle, and Marissa didn't react with surprise or praise. Just smiled and said softly, "Yes, that's cheddar." And I didn't burn it this time. Sophie giggled, a real sound, and took a bite. Philip stood in the hallway, just beyond the arch. He had been pacing by the staircase, where he saw the twins at the table, eating. He hadn't seen them touch more than dry cereal or crackers in months. Now their faces held color, their eyes movement, their shoulders something like peace. His hand gripped the doorframe as something unfamiliar rose in his throat. He wanted to walk in, to thank Marissa, to fall to his knees and sob, but he didn't move. He just watched and remembered. That night, the house was quiet again, but not dead. Philip sat in the study, staring at a blank page on his desk. He hadn't written a word since Evelyn died. Then, faintly, he heard it, that humming again. He stood and moved toward the sound. The hallway was dim, shadows stretching long across the walls. But the melody was unmistakable now. He knew it. Come thou fount of every blessing. Evelyn used to hum that same hymn when she washed the girls' hair, or folded laundry, or sat by the fire with cocoa and stories. Philip leaned against the wall, his breath shaking. He hadn't let himself cry in months, and still he didn't cry. But something cracked inside him. The next morning, before sunrise, Marissa entered the kitchen to start the coffee, and paused. Sophie and Stella were already there, sitting quietly on the bench, blankets draped over their shoulders, eyes wide and waiting. They didn't say a word. They didn't need to. Marissa moved to pour their juice, and noticed something on the refrigerator. A drawing, freshly taped. 2 girls and a third figure holding their hands. The pantry door groaned softly as Marissa tugged it open, dust particles dancing in the shaft of morning light. It hadn't been touched in months. She could tell by the layer of quiet dust on the jars and the way the door stuck a little, like even the wood had stopped expecting visitors. She came only to restock the flour. Instead, she found a piece of Evelyn Langford's heart, tucked behind an old tin of cocoa and a leaning row of mason jars was a faded floral notebook. The edges were curled, the spine frayed. It looked like it had been held often, and with love. Marissa's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside, a swirl of neat handwriting swept across every page. Notes, measurements, recipes. But this was no ordinary cookbook. Each page whispered memory. Scribbled between ingredients were notes for birthday morning pancakes, Christmas cocoa traditions, and rainy day donut holes. Next to a blueberry muffin recipe, Evelyn had written, Sophie likes hers with cinnamon on top. Stella says too much spice makes her tongue tingle. Remember that. Marissa smiled through tears. This wasn't just a recipe book. It was a love letter to her daughters. Midway through the notebook, she found it. A page titled in looping cursive, The Twins Turn 5, Birthday Plan. Underneath were simple details. Rainbow sprinkled pancakes. Yellow balloons, Sophie's favorite. Stargazer lilies, for Stella. She says they look like fire. 2 matching white dresses. And at the bottom, half finished. No matter what happens, I want them to know they are. The sentence stopped there. No period. No signature. Just an aching silence. Marissa blinked hard, her breath catching. The page had been folded and unfolded too many times. It had weight. It mattered. She looked up, suddenly aware of the date. 2 days from now. The girl's birthday. No wonder Philip hadn't mentioned it. It wasn't just painful. It was paralyzing. Marissa sat down on the kitchen stool, notebook clutched to her chest, and whispered, Lord, is this why you brought me here? She didn't hear an answer, but peace settled over her shoulders like a shawl. She looked toward the twins' drawing still taped to the fridge. 2 girls and a third figure holding their hands. They had made room for someone. Maybe it was Evelyn. Maybe it was her. Marissa wiped her tears and opened the notebook again. Her eyes scanned Evelyn's words, the love dripping from every line. She didn't have credentials. She didn't have a license. But she had faith. And a plan. "I'll do it," she whispered. "We'll give them the birthday their mama dreamed of." Philip entered the kitchen later that night and froze. The notebook was open on the counter. He stared at Evelyn's handwriting and at the words she never finished. Marissa woke before the sun. While the house still slept, she tucked Evelyn's notebook back behind the flour canister, just where she'd found it. Then she folded the grocery receipt from yesterday's supply run and slipped it into her apron pocket. One glance at the list made her heart skip. Sprinkles, whipped cream, red food coloring, and stargazer lilies. She was planning a miracle. Quietly, prayerfully. By mid-morning, she bundled the twins into the car for what she called a secret errand. They didn't ask questions, just clung to each other in the back seat, eyes curious, but cautious. She drove them into town, to Beatrice's boutique, the same children's shop Evelyn had once loved. It smelled of lavender sachets and lemon polish, and sunlight streamed through the front windows in golden sheets. An older woman with silver hair greeted them with a knowing smile. "Been a while since I saw little Langfords in here," she said gently. Marissa nodded. "We're looking for dresses. Birthday dresses." That word, birthday, hung in the air like a promise. Sophie wandered toward a red velvet dress with ruffled sleeves. Stella fingered a soft pink cotton one with tiny embroidered roses. Neither spoke at first. But then, quietly, Stella whispered, "Mommy liked red on Sophie." "And pink on you," Sophie added, almost shyly. Marissa watched from a distance, tears pricking the corners of her eyes. Not just because the girls were remembering, but because they were sharing. Out loud, they changed in the dressing room together, then twirled before the mirror. Just once, but it was enough. On the drive home, Sophie asked, "Do you think Mama sees us?" Marissa glanced at them in the rearview mirror and said, "I think she sees every twirl." Back at the mansion, she hid the dresses in her closet and stashed the party supplies behind the laundry cabinet. The notebook remained buried behind the jars, its cover now smudged with flour and hope. Philip passed through the kitchen that evening with his phone pressed to his ear. He barely noticed the girls at the table. His voice was clipped, something about an acquisition deadline, something urgent. He didn't see the new warmth in Stella's cheeks, or the sparkle in Sophie's eyes when she reached for a second helping of pasta. The twins noticed. "Will Daddy be at our birthday?" Sophie asked that night as Marissa tucked them in. Marissa paused. "I hope so, sweet girl. I really do. But what if he forgets?" Stella's voice trembled. Marissa leaned in close, brushed hair from their faces, and whispered, "Even if he does, love won't. God doesn't forget, and neither will I." The girls nodded, clinging to her hands a moment longer than usual. At dawn on the birthday morning, Marissa stood barefoot in the kitchen, apron tied tight, Evelyn's notebook open beside a bowl of pancake batter. The house was still. The oven was warm, and a miracle was already rising. Philip walked downstairs, half awake, and stopped cold. The smell of vanilla, the sound of giggles, and a familiar song being hummed from the kitchen. The morning sun painted the kitchen walls with soft gold as Marissa stirred the batter one last time, humming quietly. She glanced at the clock, 6:42 a.m., then tiptoed upstairs. Sophie and Stella were already half awake, tangled in blankets, blinking in the soft light. Marissa leaned over and whispered, "Happy birthday, my loves." Then she began to hum. Not just any song, their mother's song, the one Evelyn had written in the margins of her notebook under the heading, "Birthday Morning, age 5." It was sweet and silly, Something about pancake castles and jelly bean crowns. The twins sat up slowly, their eyes wide with recognition. "I want to show you something," Marissa said, holding the worn floral notebook to her chest. Back in the kitchen, she gently opened it before them. "Your mama wrote this. For you." She turned to the page marked "The twins turn 5." Sophie traced a finger over her mother's handwriting. "She remembered my yellow balloons." Stella blinked fast. "And the lilies." "She remembered everything," Marissa said softly. "And she wanted today to be joyful, not just sad." The girls didn't speak for a moment. Then Sophie whispered, "I thought maybe she forgot us." "No, sweet girl," Marissa said, voice catching. "She remembered you both. Every little thing." Tears fell, but this time they weren't made of only grief. They were woven with something lighter, something like joy. Stella grinned through hers. "Let's make pancakes. Mama's way." They got to work, flour in the air. Eggs cracked a little too hard, milk sloshing over the rim. Sophie dropped a spoon, and Stella accidentally dumped sprinkles into the wrong bowl. They laughed so hard they couldn't breathe. When frosting landed on noses and cheeks, Sophie giggled. "We look like dessert monsters." The kitchen pulsed with energy, like the house had been holding its breath for a year and finally exhaled. Marissa helped them slip into their new dresses, red for Sophie, pink for Stella, with delicate white ribbons tied around their waists, just like Evelyn had planned. She stood back and looked at them, heart full. "You look like your mama's dreams come true." They beamed. Candles were carefully placed atop 2 towering stacks of birthday pancakes, one with strawberries, one with blueberries. Evelyn's favorites for each. The girls sat at the table, back straight, eyes gleaming. Sophie looked at Stella. "Let's do it together." Marissa lit the candles, her hand steady despite the lump in her throat. "Make your wishes," she whispered. The twins leaned in. One breath, 2 smiles, and the front door unlocked. The house fell still. Footsteps echoed in the entryway. Marissa froze, spatula still in her hand. Philip Langford stood in the doorway, briefcase in one hand, eyes shadowed from lack of sleep, and stunned silence as he saw what he had walked into. Flames flickering on pancakes, daughters in party dresses, and Evelyn's song, still echoing faintly in the air. Philip dropped his briefcase. Sophie turned to him, whispering, "Did you remember?" Philip didn't mean to come home early. He couldn't even explain why he turned off the highway and took the long, winding road toward the estate. The conference call was still buzzing in his ear when he stepped out of the car and closed the door. And then he heard it. Laughter. Not faint or forced. Not polite. Real laughter. He froze. His chest tightened, his hand still on the doorknob. He hadn't heard that sound, that laughter, in nearly a year. His legs moved before his mind caught up. Step by step down the hallway, toward the kitchen, trembling. And then he saw it. Sophie and Stella were at the table, dressed in colors Evelyn adored, red and pink, and clapping their hands as flames danced on top of towering stacks of pancakes. Candles flickered. Sprinkles shimmered. Marissa stood beside them, smiling, not performing, just present, gentle and warm and steady. The whole room glowed. Evelyn's tablecloth, Evelyn's lilies, Evelyn's tradition. Philip's knees buckled. He dropped to the floor with a sound like breath leaving the earth. The girls turned and saw him. Daddy. 2 voices. Together. Whole. They ran. Sophie threw her arms around his neck. Stella pressed her cheek to his shoulder. He sobbed. Right there on the tile floor, in his designer suit and expensive shoes, with the ghosts of grief finally breaking open. He held them tight, like he was afraid they'd vanish. "I'm sorry," he whispered again and again. "I'm so sorry." I didn't know how to come back. Marissa stayed where she was. Quiet. Gentle. Philip finally looked up at her. His eyes red. His voice cracked. How did you do this? Marissa walked to the counter. She didn't answer with a speech, or with a clever line. She offered him a notebook. Worn. Faded. Familiar. He took it like it was made of glass. He opened it. Evelyn's handwriting spilled onto the pages, like a voice returning from heaven. Notes. Pancake recipes. Birthday plans. And then, on the final page, her last unfinished line. No matter what happens, I want them to know they are. He read it aloud, barely able to breathe. Loved, Marissa whispered, finishing the sentence. That's what she meant. Philip bent over the book, shoulders shaking. The weight of almost missing this, of almost losing them, crushed him in the most holy, necessary way. He pressed the notebook to his chest like it might bring Evelyn closer. The twins held him tighter. And Marissa, she just stood there, hands folded, eyes wet, not with pride, but with reverence, because love had come back to life in that kitchen, and the house that once forgot how to laugh was now echoing with it. That night, Marissa stood at Evelyn's grave, whispering, "They remembered you, and he's remembering too." Behind her, a voice said softly, "You brought her back." Philip sat on the living room couch with Evelyn's notebook resting in his lap like something sacred. The girls had gone upstairs, full and flushed from laughter, cheeks sticky with syrup and joy. Marissa had left him alone with the pages. He turned each one slowly, his fingers trembling. Evelyn's handwriting felt like her voice, soft, intentional, full of life. Notes about Stella's love for bedtime stories, Sophie's fear of thunderstorms, and little reminder prayers scribbled in the margins. Don't forget to pray over them even when they're asleep. Their souls still listen. He wept quietly, the kind of tears that came from the deepest places, regret, love, loss, and something new beginning. When he climbed the stairs and stepped into the girls' room, they looked up from their pillows, still awake. "I should have been here," he said, kneeling beside their beds. "Not just in the house. With you. I didn't know how to handle the pain, so I ran from it. From you. I'm sorry." Stella sat up first, eyes glassy. "We thought you didn't love us anymore." Philip's heart cracked. He reached for her hand. "I never stopped. I just got lost." Sophie slid closer, resting her head on his shoulder. "You came back." "I did," he whispered, "and I'm not leaving again." There was no long pause, no silence heavy with drama, just two little girls wrapping their arms around their father, because children, when given the chance, love without conditions. They forgave him with their whole hearts. That evening, they sat together around the dinner table, Philip, Sophie, Stella, and Marissa. The air was different now, not just full of sound, but full of presence. Philip had changed into a sweater Evelyn once gifted him. The girls wore their party dresses again, syrup stains and all. They passed plates, shared seconds, giggled. Philip took a bite of pancake and closed his eyes. Tastes just like hers. Marissa smiled from across the table. We followed her notes exactly. Philip looked at her, not as the maid who had tidied his house, but as the woman who had resurrected his family, the woman who had heard the silence and answered it with love. After dessert, he leaned back and asked the girls, "If we started a new tradition, something that's ours, but also Mama's, what would it be?" The girls looked at each other. Then Sophie said, "Memory Sundays." Stella nodded. "We could tell stories about her, and maybe bake something new each time." Philip's throat tightened again. "Like Mama would want," he said. "Exactly," they whispered. He reached across the table and took both their hands in his. I'll be here. Every Sunday. Every story. Every crumb. I promise. Marissa looked on, quietly clearing plates, her eyes misty. No angels sang. No lights flashed. But something holy still hovered in that dining room, because grief hadn't left them, but love had finally come home. As the girls drifted to sleep, Philip walked outside to Evelyn's old garden. Marissa was there, kneeling in the moonlight. She would have been proud of you, she whispered. Of us. 2 weeks passed, quiet and full. Laughter became part of the morning routine again. Pancakes weren't just for birthdays anymore. The girls had started drawing pictures of their mom, not with halos or tears, but with flowers in her hair and smiles wide as the sun. The house breathed differently now. Lighter, warmer, alive. Philip sat in his study that afternoon, the same leather chair where he'd once buried himself in silence. But today, the air smelled like cinnamon from the kitchen, and a picture the girls had drawn, of the 4 of them, hand in hand, hung beside Evelyn's framed photo on the wall. He glanced at the notebook, still on his desk, worn and holy. "Marissa," he called. She stepped in quietly, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Yes." He stood, the weight in his chest not from grief this time, but from something tender and steady. "Sit with me for a moment?" She hesitated, then nodded. He met her eyes. "You didn't just take care of my daughters. You brought them back to life. You brought me back." Marissa shook her head, blinking fast. "I didn't do anything special. I just love them." "That's the most special thing anyone's done in this house since Evelyn." His voice caught. "And I want to give something back." He handed her a folder, an official letter inside. "I want to fund your full education," he said. "Social work, family counseling, whatever path you choose. And I'd like you to stay, as the girls' mentor, their caregiver. More than that, their constant." Marissa covered her mouth, overwhelmed. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll stay," Philip whispered. "We're not whole without you anymore." She nodded, tears streaming. "I'll stay. I'll stay as long as they need me." At the sound of her voice cracking, the twins burst into the study, having clearly been eavesdropping from the hallway. "You're staying?" Sophie squealed. "Forever?" Stella asked, wide-eyed. Marissa dropped to her knees, just in time to catch them both. "If you'll have me." They clung to her, arms wrapped tight around her neck. Tears and giggles tangled together. "Promise you'll never leave," they whispered. Philip looked on, hands in his pockets, heart wide open. He didn't see Evelyn, but he felt her. Not like before, wrapped in pain. Now it felt like gratitude, like grace. That evening, they all sat on the porch as the sun set over the hills, warm orange light washing over the estate. The girls played with sidewalk chalk. Marissa sipped sweet tea beside him. "You're a part of this family now," Philip said. "I hope you know that." Marissa nodded, smiling. "I do." Inside, the house glowed, picture frames polished, music playing softly, fresh flowers in the entryway. The life Evelyn built had not died. It had bloomed again. Philip looked at his daughters, laughing freely on the steps. And for the first time in nearly a year, he felt not the ache of what was lost, but the joy of what was reborn. Sometimes, the person you least expect becomes the one who brings your family back to life.